Some killers flee into the darkness the moment their work is done. Others do something far more disturbing. Imagine a suburban home in Tokyo, warm lights glowing through windows on a cold December night. A family of 4, mother, father, 2 children, settling in for the evening, unaware that someone is watching from the darkness outside, unaware that in a few hours they'll all be dead, and unaware that after killing them, their murderer won't leave. He'll stay for hours, eating their food, using their computer, treating his wounds with their first aid supplies, moving through their home as if it were his own, stepping over their bodies, making himself comfortable in the house where he's just committed the unthinkable. And then, before dawn, he'll simply walk away, leaving behind more evidence than any criminal in Japanese history. But despite that evidence, despite his DNA, his fingerprints, his clothing, even his feces, he's never been caught. This is the story of the Setagaya family murder. The case that changed Japanese law. The killer without a face. Prologue. The Goldilocks murder. December 31st, 2000, the last morning of the millennium year. Most of Tokyo is preparing for New Year's celebrations, or Misoka, the day when families gather to eat toshikoshi soba, watch television specials, and wait for midnight to welcome the new year. It's one of the most important days in the Japanese calendar, a time for reflection, gratitude, and hope. But in the quiet neighborhood of Kamisoshigaya in Setagaya Ward, Western Tokyo, one family will not celebrate. They'll never celebrate anything again. At 10:30 a.m., a woman named Haruko, a grandmother, a mother, a woman who'd lived next door to her daughter's family for years, uses her spare key to enter the house she'd helped them maintain. She'd been calling all morning, worried when no one answered. The phone simply rang and rang, unanswered. She opens the door and steps inside. What she sees will haunt her for the rest of her life. At the bottom of the stairs, crumpled in an unnatural position, lies her son-in-law, Mikio. His body is cold. There's blood. So much blood. She screams. She runs back outside and calls the police, her hands shaking so badly she can barely dial. The Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department arrives within minutes. What they discover inside that house will become the most infamous unsolved murder case in modern Japanese history. The victims. Let's meet the family before we discuss how they died. They deserve that much. Mikio Miyazawa, age 44, a kind, gentle man who worked for a marketing company. He was known among neighbors as polite, helpful, always willing to lend a hand. He had a passion for theater and the arts. His computer bookmarks would later show frequent visits to local theater websites. He was a devoted father who took his children to parks, helped with homework, and dreamed of a better future for his family. Yasuko Miyazawa, age 41. Mikio's wife, a homemaker and part-time tutor who supplemented the family income by teaching students from their home. She was warm, organized, efficient, the kind of person who kept photo albums meticulously updated, who remembered birthdays, who made sure her children always had clean clothes and full lunchboxes. She lived next door to her own mother, Haruko, in a connected duplex, a traditional arrangement that allowed her to care for her aging parent while raising her own children. Nina Miyazawa, age 8, a bright, cheerful second grader who loved school and her friends. She played with neighborhood children in nearby Soshigaya Park, came home with skinned knees and stories about her day, drew pictures that her parents hung on the refrigerator. She had her whole life ahead of her. Rei Miyazawa, age 6, the baby of the family, a kindergartner with a gentle spirit and a shy smile. He adored his older sister, followed her everywhere, looked up to his father with the kind of pure admiration only young children possess. They were ordinary, they were unremarkable, they were a family. And on the night of December 30th, 2000, someone murdered all 4 of them. The house. To understand what happened, you need to understand the layout of the Miyazawa home. The house was located in Kamisoshigaya, a residential area in Setagaya Ward. By the year 2000, the neighborhood was in the process of being demolished. The metropolitan government of Tokyo had plans to expand the nearby Soshigaya Park, and had been systematically buying up properties and relocating families. Most of the Miyazawa's neighbors were already gone. House after house stood empty, windows dark, yards overgrown. The once busy residential street had become a ghost neighborhood, isolated, quiet, eerily deserted. The Miyazawa home was actually a duplex. Yasuko's mother, Haruko, lived in the connected unit next door with Yasuko's sister, Aniri, and her husband. A thin wall separated the 2 households, but they were independent residences with separate entrances. Behind the Miyazawa house was Soshigaya Park. The park had baseball fields, walking paths, and most significantly, for this story, a skateboarding area that had recently been installed. The house itself was 2 stories. The first floor contained a living area, kitchen, and bathroom. The second floor had bedrooms, another bathroom, and a small living space. A staircase connected the 2 levels. At the rear of the second floor was a bathroom window that faced the park. The window was small, just large enough for a person to squeeze through if they tried hard enough. On the night of December 30th, 2000, that window was unlocked. It was the way the killer got in. Part 1, The Last Day. December 30th, 2000. The Miyazawa family spent their last day together doing ordinary things. In the morning, they went shopping near Chitose Karasuyama Station, browsing the shopping arcade, picking up groceries and supplies for the upcoming New Year's holiday. Yasuko bought ingredients for their celebratory meal. Mikio may have purchased something for the children, a small treat perhaps, or a toy to celebrate the new year. They returned home in the afternoon and spent the rest of the day relaxing. The weather was cold, typical for late December in Tokyo. But the house was warm and comfortable. They had dinner together. They watched television. The children may have played games or worked on homework. Mikio probably spent time on his computer, as he often did in the evenings. Yasuko's mother, Haruko, was next door with Yasuko's sister and brother-in-law. They'd made plans to celebrate New Year's together the next day. It was supposed to be a happy family gathering. By late evening, the Miyazawa household was settling down for the night. The children went to bed first, Ray in his room on the second floor, Nina likely reading or playing quietly before sleep. Mikio was probably downstairs, perhaps watching late-night television or working on his computer. Yasuko may have been tidying up, preparing for the next day's celebrations. It was a normal night, an unremarkable evening in an ordinary family's life. And then, sometime after 11 p.m., everything changed. Part 2, The Intruder. 11:30 p.m., 12:05 a.m. Based on forensic evidence, police believe the killer entered the Miyazawa home between 11:30 p.m. and midnight. He climbed a tree at the rear of the property, a tree that grew close to the house, its branches reaching toward the second-floor windows. From there, he removed the screen from the bathroom window. The screen was later found on the ground below, and squeezed through the small opening. It would have been a tight fit. The window was barely large enough for an adult to pass through, but he managed. He dropped down into the second-floor bathroom, probably landing with a soft thud on the tile floor. And then he began moving through the house. The first kill, Ray. The killer's first target was 6-year-old Ray, who was sleeping in his bedroom on the second floor, the room immediately adjacent to the bathroom where the intruder had entered. The door was probably open. Japanese homes often don't have locks on interior bedroom doors. Ray was asleep, small and vulnerable, unaware of the danger. The killer approached the bed, and then using only his bare hands, he strangled the child to death. There was no noise loud enough to wake the rest of the family immediately, no screams. Ray was 6 years old, small, easily overpowered. The killer likely covered his mouth while strangling him, ensuring silence. Ray Miyazawa was the only victim not stabbed. His body showed no stab wounds, no blood, just ligature marks around his neck from where hands, adult hands much stronger than a child's, had squeezed until he stopped breathing. The killer left Ray's body on the bed and continued through the house. And that's when Mikio heard something. The fight. Mikio Miyazawa was downstairs when he heard sounds from the second floor. Not loud sounds, not screaming or obvious signs of struggle, but something that made him uneasy. Footsteps perhaps, a thud, movement where there shouldn't be movement. He climbed the stairs to investigate. At the top of the stairs, he encountered the intruder. What happened next was violent and desperate. Mikio fought for his life. He fought hard enough to injure the killer. Evidence would later show the intruder sustained significant wounds during this struggle, losing enough blood to require first aid. But Mikio was unarmed. The killer had brought a weapon, a sashimi bocho knife, a long, sharp blade traditionally used for slicing fish. Professional, effective, deadly. The two men struggled at the top of the stairs. Mikio managed to wound the killer, but the knife was finding its marks. The killer stabbed Mikio in the head, driving the blade in with such force that part of it broke off. A piece of the sashimi knife would later be found embedded in Mikio's skull. Mikio Miyazawa died at the top of the stairs, his body eventually tumbling down to the first floor where his mother-in-law would find it hours later. But before he died, his struggle had accomplished something crucial. He'd alerted his wife. The murders. Yasuko and Nina. Yasuko heard the struggle. She knew something terrible was happening upstairs. She likely grabbed her daughter Nina, trying to protect her, trying to find a way to escape or hide. But there was nowhere to go. The killer came down the stairs, the broken sashimi knife still in his hand. He attacked Yasuko first, stabbing her with a ferocity that police would later describe as excessive. She was stabbed so many times with such force that her bones were visible through the wounds. The broken knife wasn't enough, so the killer grabbed Santoku knife from the Miyazawa family's own kitchen and continued the attack. 8-year-old Nina watched her mother die, and then the killer turned on her. The little girl who'd gone shopping with her family that morning, who'd had dinner and watched TV and gotten ready for bed anticipating New Year's celebrations, was stabbed to death in her own home. By 12:05 a.m., barely 30 minutes after the killer entered the house, all 4 members of the Miyazawa family were dead. Ray, strangled in his bed. Mikio, stabbed at the top of the stairs, his body at the bottom. Yasuko, stabbed to death trying to protect her daughter. Nina, murdered in front of her dying mother. A family of 4, gone. And then, the killer did something that would make this case infamous. He didn't leave. Part 3. The hours after. 12:05 a.m. dawn. In most murders, the killer flees immediately. The survival instinct kicks in. Get away from the scene, dispose of evidence, establish an alibi, disappear into the night. Every second at the crime scene increases the risk of being caught, but this killer was different. After murdering 4 people, he stayed, for hours, treating his wounds. The struggle with Mikio had injured the killer badly enough that he needed medical attention. Blood, his own blood, was everywhere. He'd been cut or stabbed during the fight, and the wounds were serious. He went to the bathroom and opened the Miyazawa family's first aid kit. He used bandages, antiseptic, anything he could find to stop the bleeding. When bandages weren't enough, he grabbed some of Yasuko's sanitary pads and used them to staunch the blood flow from his wounds. The bathroom became a scene of its own horror. Blood-soaked medical supplies, discarded bandages, evidence of someone calmly treating their injuries while 4 bodies lay throughout the house. From this blood, police would later determine the killer was male, blood type A. Years later, as DNA technology improved, they'd learn even more, but we'll get to that. Making himself comfortable. After treating his wounds, the killer began exploring the house as if he owned it. He went to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. He took out ice cream, 4 small containers, and ate them without using utensils, squeezing the containers to push the ice cream to the top and taking bites directly from the packaging. His saliva and fingerprints were left all over the containers. He drank 4 bottles of barley tea straight from the bottles. He cut open a melon and ate pieces of it. He moved through the house, stepping over Mikio's body at the bottom of the stairs, walking past the rooms where the other family members lay dead, completely unbothered by the carnage surrounding him. Using the bathroom. At some point during his hours in the house, the killer used the toilet. He evacuated his bowels, and he didn't flush. This detail would prove crucial to the investigation. From the feces he left behind, forensic analysts were able to determine what he'd eaten before the murders: string beans and sesame seeds. Simple, cheap, common foods in Japan, often eaten by younger people. It was an intimate violation on top of mass murder, using a family's bathroom, leaving waste behind, treating their home with such casual disrespect even after killing them. The computer. At 1:18 a.m., more than an hour after the murders, the killer turned on Mikio Miyazawa's computer on the first floor. Computer logs show the machine connected to the internet. The killer created a new folder. He browsed websites, including a local theater website that Mikio had bookmarked, possibly the same theater Mikio had planned to visit for New Year's entertainment. Some sources suggest the killer may have been trying to purchase tickets or browse show times. Others believe he was simply curious, passing time, treating the computer as if it were his own. The computer stayed connected for some time, then it went dark. Ransacking and stealing or not, the killer went through the Miyazawa family's belongings. He opened drawers, pulled out papers and documents, rifled through personal items. He took Mikio's wallet and Yasuko's purse and dumped their contents, along with various documents, into the bathtub on the second floor. Interestingly, he didn't take all the money. Some of Yasuko's tutoring income was missing, but approximately 250,000 yen, nearly $2,000 USD, was left behind in the house. If this was a robbery, it was a strange one. The killer took some money, but not all. He ransacked the house, but didn't seem to be looking for anything specific. The behavior suggested someone searching out of anger or frustration, rather than someone executing a planned theft. Changing clothes. The killer's own clothing was drenched in blood, his victim's blood mixed with his own. He couldn't leave the house looking like that without attracting immediate attention. So he went to Mikio's closet and helped himself to clean clothes. He changed into Mikio's clothing, leaving his own blood-soaked garments behind. What he left behind would become some of the most analyzed evidence in Japanese criminal history. A purple and white baseball-style shirt, only 130 sold in all of Japan. A black Uniqlo padded jacket, size L, released September 2000. A grey knitted bucket hat, black Edwin brand gloves, one size fits all, 2 black Muji brand handkerchiefs, one wrapped around a knife handle, one possibly used as a mask, a hip bag fanny pack, white Slazenger running shoes, size 11, manufactured in South Korea, never sold in Japan. The clothing smelled of Dracar Noir cologne, a popular men's fragrance. Every single item the killer wore was left behind. He walked out of the house wearing Mikio Miyazawa's clothes. Some sources suggest the killer may have taken a nap on the sofa in the second-floor living room at some point during his stay. There's no way to verify this definitively, but the image is chilling. A murderer sleeping peacefully in the home where he's just killed an entire family, resting before continuing his journey. Departure. The killer stayed in the house until at least 1:18 a.m., the computer log timestamp. He possibly stayed until dawn, somewhere between 5 o'clock and 6 a.m., when it would still be dark enough to leave unnoticed. At some point before leaving, he unplugged the family's telephone. This is why Haruko's calls the next morning went unanswered. The phone wasn't ringing, it was disconnected. And then, wearing Mikio's clothing, carrying nothing, his own belongings left behind, the killer simply walked out of the house and disappeared into the Tokyo night. Part 4. The Discovery. December 31st, 2000, 10:30 a.m. Haruko had been calling her daughter's house all morning. New Year's Eve was an important day. They had plans to celebrate together. But the phone just rang and rang, no answer. Finally, worried, she walked next door from her own unit in the duplex and rang the doorbell. No answer. She knocked, called out, nothing. Using her spare key, she unlocked the door and stepped inside. "Yasuko? Mikio?" she called. "Are the children still sleeping?" Silence. And then she saw it. At the bottom of the stairs, Mikio's body, cold and stiff, surrounded by dried blood. Haruko screamed. She ran back outside and called the police, her voice breaking, barely able to form coherent words. The police arrive. The Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department responded immediately. Officers arrived at the scene within minutes, expecting a murder, one victim, tragic but contained. What they found was something else entirely. 4 bodies, 2 adults, 2 children, massive amounts of blood, evidence everywhere, clothing left behind, food containers, computer logs, bathroom evidence, fingerprints on every surface. This wasn't just a murder. This was a massacre that had been followed by hours of the killer making himself at home. The lead investigator, Takeshi Tsuchida, chief of Seisho Police Station, took charge immediately. He knew this would be a massive case. He had no idea just how massive it would become. The crime scene. Let's walk through what police found room by room. Second floor, Ray's bedroom. Ray's body on the bed, no blood. Ligature marks on neck. Killer's fingerprints on surfaces, no blood. Suggesting he killed Ray first, before the others bled. Top of stairs, second floor hallway. Evidence of struggle. Blood spatter indicating where Mikio was stabbed. Part of broken sashimi knife blade. Bottom of stairs. Mikio's body. Massive blood loss from multiple stab wounds. Embedded knife fragment in skull. Second floor living area. Yasuko and Nina's bodies. Extreme violence evident from wounds. Blood throughout the room. Broken sashimi knife nearby. Santoku kitchen knife, family's own, used as secondary weapon. Kitchen. 4 empty ice cream containers with saliva and fingerprints, empty barley tea bottles, partially eaten melon, refrigerator door left open. Bathroom, second floor, open first aid kit, bloody bandages, sanitary pads soaked in killer's blood, unflushed toilet containing feces. Bathroom, first floor, window screen removed, found on ground outside, evidence of entry point. Bathtub, documents, papers, wallet contents, purse contents dumped inside, some money missing, much more left behind. Living room computer area, computer logs showing 1:18 a.m. usage, theater website in browsing history, new folder created, phone unplugged. Sofa, pile of killer's clothing and items, purple and white shirt, blood-soaked, black Uniqlo jacket, grey knitted hat, black gloves, 2 black handkerchiefs, hip bag, white Slazenger shoes, size 11, broken sashimi knife, Santoku kitchen knife. The sheer amount of evidence was staggering. Most criminals try to minimize their trace. This killer had left everything. Chapter 5. The investigation begins. The Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department launched what would become one of the largest investigations in Japanese history. Over the coming months and years, more than 280,000 officers would work on this case in some capacity. They would collect over 12,545 pieces of evidence. They would follow thousands of leads, interview countless witnesses, and pursue every possible angle. And they would fail to identify the killer. But let's examine what they learned. Physical profile of the killer. From the evidence left behind, police were able to build a detailed physical profile. Height, approximately 170 centimeters, 5'7" pose, determined from stride length and reach patterns. Build, thin to average build. Age at time of crime, estimated 25 years old, based on behavior, food preferences, physical capabilities, blood type A. Shoe size 27.5 centimeters, about size 11 US. Injuries, sustained cuts, stab wounds during struggle with Mikio, required significant first aid. DNA evidence. This is where the case becomes truly fascinating and frustrating. The killer left his DNA everywhere. Blood, saliva, hair, feces, biological evidence all over the crime scene. When DNA analysis became more sophisticated in the years following 2000, police were able to determine something remarkable about the killer's ancestry. Maternal line, European descent, possibly from countries near the Mediterranean or Adriatic Sea. Some recent reports suggest possible Caucasus region ancestry. Paternal line, East Asian descent, specifically Y chromosome analysis showed haplogroup OM122, which appears in 1 in 4, 5 Koreans, 1 in 10 Chinese, 1 in 13 Japanese. The killer was of mixed ancestry, Asian father, European mother, or distant European maternal ancestor. This suggested he might be half Japanese and half European, or possibly Korean or Chinese with European maternal ancestry. The clothing. Every piece of clothing the killer left behind was meticulously analyzed. The purple and white shirt, rare item. Only 130 sold in all of Japan. Only 10 sold in Tokyo at now closed MX stores. Released just 2 months before the murders. Police tracked down owners of only 12 of the 130 sold nationwide. None led to the killer. The Uniqlo jacket, size L, black, padded, released September 2000, brand new at time of murders. Common item, hard to trace. The grey knitted hat, sold from September 1999 to November 2000. Relatively common, difficult to trace. The Edwin gloves, one-size-fits-all black gloves, sold from 1998 to 2000. Impossible to trace to specific buyer. The Muji handkerchiefs, 2 black handkerchiefs. One had 3 centimeters cut in center, wrapped around knife handle. Both smelled of Drakkar Noir cologne. The Slazenger shoes, size 27.5 centimeters, US size 11. White running shoes, manufactured in South Korea. Critical detail. This shoe size was never sold in Japan, only available in South Korea. This last detail is hugely significant. The killer was wearing shoes that literally could not be purchased in Japan. He either lived in/visited South Korea, or someone brought them to him from there. The hip bag. Inside the hip bag the killer left behind, police found trace amounts of sand. After extensive analysis, that sand was determined to come from 2 specific locations. The Nevada desert, specifically the area around Edwards Air Force Base in California, USA. A skate park in Japan, exact location not publicly specified but believed to be in Tokyo area. How did sand from Edwards Air Force Base end up in a hip bag in Tokyo? This discovery spawned numerous theories about American military connections, which we'll explore later. The food evidence. From the feces left in the toilet, forensic analysis determined the killer had recently eaten string beans, sesame seeds. These are common, inexpensive foods in Japan, often consumed by younger people. They provided little investigative value, but painted a picture of someone who ate simple meals. The ice cream and barley tea he consumed in the house were the Miyazawa's own groceries, nothing special or distinctive. Pockets and traces. The pocket of the purple and white shirt contained traces of bird droppings, Japanese Zelkova tree leaves, willow tree leaves. This suggested the killer had been in areas with these specific trees recently, possibly parks or wooded areas. Zelkova and willow are common in Tokyo, but the combination might help pinpoint locations he'd visited. 3 types of fluorescent dye. On the shoes and hip bag, police found 3 different types of powdered fluorescent dye. These dyes are used in various industrial and commercial applications. The presence of 3 different types suggested the killer had been in multiple locations with different dye exposures, possibly construction sites, factories, or commercial buildings. Fingerprints. The killer left fingerprints everywhere, on ice cream containers, on bottles, on computer keyboard and mouse, on surfaces throughout the house, even in Ray's room, with no blood, confirming he was killed first. Police ran these fingerprints through every database available. Japanese criminal database, no match. Japanese driver's license database, no match. Japanese passport database, no match. International databases, including FBI, no match. The killer had never been fingerprinted by any official agency. He had no criminal record in any country that shared databases with Japan. This suggested either he was a first-time offender with no prior crimes, he was from a country that didn't share fingerprint data, he was young enough to have never needed fingerprinting for any official document. Part 6. Theories. Over the past 24 years, countless theories have been proposed to explain who killed the Miyazawa family and why. Let's examine the major ones. Theory 1. The angry skateboarder. This was police's initial theory, and it sounds almost absurd, but there was logic behind it. Setagaya Park, directly behind the Miyazawa house, had recently installed a skateboarding area. Skateboarders used it regularly, often late into the evening, creating noise. Some sources claim Mikio Miyazawa had complained about the noise to park authorities or possibly directly to skaters. This complaint, the theory goes, angered someone enough to murder his entire family in revenge. Evidence supporting. The killer entered through a window facing the park. The hip bag contained sand from a skate park in Japan. The killer's age profile, 15-25, fits typical skateboarder demographics. The time of attack, late night, fits when skaters might be at the park. Evidence against. This is an insanely disproportionate response to noise complaints. No evidence Mikio actually complained to anyone specific. The systematic nature of the murders seems too organized for a spontaneous revenge killing. Why stay for hours after? Why eat ice cream? The mixed European-Asian ancestry doesn't necessarily connect to skateboarding. This theory has largely fallen out of favor, though it circulates online regularly. Theory 2. The vagrant drifter. Perhaps the killer was a homeless person or drifter who entered the house randomly, murdered the family for unclear reasons, and then stayed because he had nowhere else to go. Evidence supporting. The behavior after the murders, eating food, using bathroom, sleeping, could indicate someone who was hungry, tired, homeless. The simple foods he'd eaten, string beans, sesame seeds, suggest limited resources. The seemingly random target, why this family, fits with opportunistic crime. He left wearing Mikio's clothes, possibly because his own were inadequate. Evidence against. The clothing he wore was relatively new and decent quality, not vagrant attire. The DNA and fingerprints show no criminal record, unusual for someone living on streets. The precision of the attack, knowing how to access house through window, suggests familiarity with the property. vagrants typically don't travel with hip bags containing sand from Edwards Air Force Base. Theory 3. The hired killer real estate conspiracy. This theory, promoted by some journalists and investigators, suggests the killer was a hitman hired by real estate developers to force the Miyazawa family out so park expansion could proceed. The context: most neighbors had sold and moved by 2000. The Miyazawa family kept delaying their departure. Real estate development is a massive, lucrative business in Tokyo. The family had already agreed to sell but was slow to actually leave, citing children's difficulty adjusting. Evidence supporting a professional hit would explain why killer showed no emotion, calmly stayed and cleaned up. The mixed ancestry, possibly Korean, could fit with contractors hiring foreign hitmen. The Slazenger shoes only sold in Korea support Korean connection. The sand from Edwards Air Force Base could indicate military contractor background. Real estate disputes in Japan have occasionally led to violence. Evidence against. Why would a professional hitman leave all his clothing and DNA? Why stay for hours eating ice cream and using computer? Why use bare hands to kill a child, Ray, when he had a knife? Why not make it look like accident or natural causes? Real estate developers can simply wait out delays. Murder is extreme and risky. No evidence of any developers having motive this strong. This theory persists, but has significant logical holes. Theory 4. The American military connection. The sand from Edwards Air Force Base sparked intense speculation about U.S. military involvement. The theory: multiple U.S. military bases operate in Japan. Edwards Air Force Base in California is a major USAF installation. Perhaps the killer was a U.S. service member stationed in Japan, or a dependent family member of someone stationed at a base, or someone with access to military facilities. Evidence supporting sand from Edwards Air Force Base in hip bag is hard to explain otherwise. American military bases in Japan have their own jurisdiction. Mixed European-Asian ancestry could fit military family demographics. Size 11 shoes might be more common among Americans. If killer left Japan shortly after on military transport, it would explain disappearance. Evidence against. How does Edwards AFB sand specifically get from California to Japan? Military personnel are fingerprinted. Should show up in databases. Military families on bases are trackable. No reports of anyone disappearing or leaving Japan suspiciously after murders. Japanese police would have investigated this angle thoroughly. This theory is popular but unproven. Theory 5. The Korean connection. Several pieces of evidence point toward a Korean connection. Slazenger shoes only sold in South Korea. Sweaters sold in limited Tokyo shops but more widely available in Korea. Y chromosome markers appear in 1 in 4. 5 Koreans versus 1 in 13 Japanese. Some investigators believe killer may have been North Korean agent, though this seems far-fetched. The theory: the killer was either a Korean national visiting or living in Japan, a Japanese person of Korean descent, someone who had recently been to South Korea. Evidence supporting. The shoe size distribution and brand point specifically to Korea. Korea is close to Japan. Travel is common. the mixed European-Asian ancestry could fit Korean demographics. If he fled to Korea after murders, Japanese police have no jurisdiction. Evidence against. Simply owning Korean shoes doesn't make someone Korean. The European maternal DNA requires explanation beyond Korean national. Why would a Korean specifically target this Japanese family? No clear motive emerges from Korean connection alone. Theory 6. The mentally disturbed individual. Perhaps the killer had severe mental illness that explains both the violence and the bizarre post-murder behavior. Evidence supporting. The combination of brutal murders and casual hanging around suggests detachment from reality. Eating victims' food while they lay dead nearby indicates lack of normal emotional response. The seemingly pointless ransacking and dumping of items could indicate disorganized thinking. Strangling a child with bare hands, then switching to knife for others, shows inconsistent methodology. Evidence against. The entry method, climbing tree, removing screen, shows planning and physical capability. Successfully evading capture for 24+ years suggests some level of competence and awareness. Leaving no post-murder trail suggests controlled behavior. The systematic checking of rooms and attacking family members shows purpose, not random chaos. Most severely mentally ill individuals don't travel internationally, Edwards AFB Sand, or maintain the physical fitness this crime required. Theory 7. Someone who knew the family. Some investigators believe the killer had personal knowledge of the Miyazawa family or their home. Evidence supporting. He knew about the bathroom window access point. He knew the house layout well enough to navigate it in darkness. He specifically targeted Ray first, the youngest, most vulnerable. He stayed for hours without fear of discovery, suggesting knowledge that neighbors were mostly gone. Some personal items were taken while valuables were left, possibly looking for something specific. The attack occurred on December 30th, right before New Year's, when most Japanese families would be home together. Evidence against. No one in the family circle matched the DNA or physical profile. Miyazawas had no known enemies or serious conflicts. Yasuko's tutoring students were all accounted for and investigated. Mikio's co-workers had alibis. Haruko and the Eries next door heard nothing unusual, suggesting killer was quiet, like a stranger being stealthy. Theory 8. Wrong house, mistaken identity. Perhaps the killer intended to attack a different family in the neighborhood and entered the wrong house in the darkness. Evidence supporting. The neighborhood was mostly empty and confusing to navigate. Many houses looked similar. The killer's behavior after staying, eating, using computer could indicate he realized his mistake but decided to stay anyway since he'd already committed to the act. No clear motive for targeting Miyazawa specifically. Evidence against. Climbing to a specific second-floor window suggests deliberate targeting of this exact house. The killer knew enough to unplug the phone before leaving. He went through personal documents as if looking for something. This doesn't explain the excessive violence or the decision to stay. Theory 9. The calculating psychopath. Perhaps the killer was a young psychopath who murdered for the experience. then stayed to savor his crime and live out a fantasy. Evidence supporting the calm behavior after murder, eating, using computer, napping, suggests emotional detachment. Killing an entire family, including children, requires lack of empathy. Staying at the scene for hours suggests curiosity or enjoyment rather than panic. The mixed violence methods, strangulation versus stabbing, could indicate experimentation. Never being caught in 24 years suggests intelligence and planning ability. Leaving all evidence behind might be arrogance. Catch me if you can. Evidence against. Most psychopathic killers escalate. Where are the other crimes? The entry method suggests desperation or impulsiveness, not careful planning. Using the victim's computer to browse theater websites is oddly mundane. No evidence of sexual assault or other markers of sadistic pleasure. Theory 10. Revenge. Unknown motive. The most likely theory according to many investigators. This was personal, but the motive remains unknown because we don't know the full story of the victims' lives. The logic. The excessive violence against Yasuko suggests rage. The systematic killing of entire family suggests eliminating witnesses and/or punishing the family unit. Staying to go through documents suggests looking for something. Taking some money, but not all, suggests symbolic theft rather than financial motive. The attack on December 30th, right before important family holiday, may have been symbolically chosen. Possible unknown motives. Business deal gone wrong. Romantic rejection or relationship complication. Perceived insult or dishonor. Gambling debt. Someone Mikio or Yasuko knew professionally who felt wronged. Family secret or hidden connection. The truth is, we may never know the motive because we still don't know who the killer is. Part 7. The Aftermath. The investigation continues. In the immediate aftermath, Tokyo Metropolitan Police threw everything at this case. 280,000 officers involved over the years. Massive dragnet investigating anyone matching the profile. Tracking down every purchaser of the rare purple and white shirt. Investigating skateboarding communities. Checking alibis of everyone connected to the family. DNA testing of suspects. Over 1,000 people tested. Following up on thousands of tips from the public. But nothing worked. Every lead turned cold. Every suspect was ruled out. Public response. The murders shocked Japan. The nation's crime rate was already low, and family annihilations were virtually unheard of. The brutality of the crime, children murdered in their own home, a killer who stayed to eat ice cream, was beyond comprehension for most Japanese citizens. The media coverage was intense. The case became known as the Setagaya family murder or the Setagaya incident. It dominated headlines for months. Some journalists criticized the police investigation, arguing that crucial early hours were wasted. Others defended the police, noting they'd done everything humanly possible with the evidence available. The house, the Miyazawa house, stood empty for years after the murders. It was too contaminated by violence for the family to ever live in again, too associated with tragedy for anyone else to want. In 2003, the house was demolished as part of the planned park expansion. The empty lot remained for several years. In 2006, the land was integrated into Setagaya Park. Where the Miyazawa family home once stood, there is now a children's playground. Children play where children died. Life goes on. The neighborhood rebuilt itself, but the memory remains. Haruko's grief. Haruko, the grandmother who discovered the bodies, lost her daughter, son-in-law, and both grandchildren in one night. The trauma was unimaginable. In the years following the murders, Haruko became an advocate for the case. She gave interviews, made public pleas for information, and expressed frustration when leads didn't pan out. "My daughter and her family were murdered, and the killer is still free," she said in one interview. "Every year that passes, I wonder if justice will ever come." Haruko died in 2017, 17 years after the murders, never seeing the case solved. Yasuko's sister, Aniri, and her husband continue to hope for resolution, but they've largely withdrawn from public life, their grief too private and too deep for constant media attention. The reward. In 2010, the Tokyo Metropolitan Police offered a 20 million yen reward, approximately $200,000 USD, for information leading to the killer's arrest. Despite thousands of tips, the reward remains unclaimed. Legal changes. The Setagaya family murder directly led to changes in Japanese law. In 2010, partially in response to this case remaining unsolved, Japan enacted a law extending the statute of limitations for murder from 15 years to 25 years. Then in 2010, they eliminated the statute of limitations for murder entirely. This meant that even if decades pass, the Setagaya killer can still be prosecuted whenever he's caught. The case also prompted improvements in DNA database systems, interagency cooperation, evidence preservation techniques, international information sharing, but none of these improvements helped identify the killer who left behind so much evidence on December 30th, 2000. Part 8. The annual ritual. Every December 30th, on the anniversary of the murders, Tokyo Metropolitan Police conduct a ritual that has continued for 24 years. They set up information booths near the site of the former Miyazawa home. Officers hand out flyers to passers-by, asking for any information, no matter how small. They describe the evidence, show pictures of the clothing, remind the public that this case remains unsolved. And every year they receive tips, some serious, most not. Someone thinks they saw someone matching the description. Someone remembers a neighbor who acted strangely in early 2001. Someone has a theory about the Edwards Air Force Base sand. Every tip is investigated, every lead followed up. And every year the case remains unsolved. The press conferences. The lead investigator, now long retired, used to give annual press conferences on the anniversary. He'd stand before cameras and reporters and say, in effect, "We're still working on it. We haven't forgotten. We will find him." Current investigators continue this tradition. The message never changes. We will not give up. The killer will be caught. But as the years pass, the press conferences get shorter. The media attention diminishes. Other crimes demand resources. Officers who worked the case retire. The evidence sits in storage, waiting for technology to advance enough to reveal something new. The Cold Case Unit. The Setagaya case is now handled by Tokyo Metropolitan Police's Cold Case Unit. They periodically review the evidence, hoping new forensic techniques might yield breakthroughs. In 2017, they reanalyzed the DNA using more advanced techniques and refined the maternal ancestry information. The European connection became clearer. In 2020, they announced new findings about the sand composition, though this didn't lead to the killer's identification. The evidence is periodically retested as technology improves. Each time, investigators hope for the breakthrough that will finally crack the case. So far, it hasn't come. Part 9. Where is he now? The unsettling question. The killer was likely between 15 to 25 years old in 2000. That would make him approximately 40 to 50 years old today, in 2025. He's out there, somewhere. Unless he's dead, which is possible, he's living a life. He might have a family, a job, friends who have no idea what he did on December 30th, 2000. Does he think about it? Does he feel guilt? Or was he the kind of person who could murder a family, eat their ice cream, and simply move on with his life without a second thought? Did he kill again? One of the most perplexing aspects of this case, there are no known similar crimes. Most killers who commit a crime this violent either escalate, killing again, or get caught for other crimes, but no murders in Japan before or after match this MO. This suggests either this was his only crime, unlikely for someone capable of such violence. He left Japan shortly after and killed elsewhere under different circumstances. He's committed other crimes, but not murders, or murders that don't match this pattern. He was caught/imprisoned/died for unrelated reasons before he could kill again. The lack of similar crimes is actually suspicious. It suggests someone who had a specific reason to target the Miyazawa family and no motive to kill anyone else. International escape? Given the evidence of Korean shoes in Edwards Air Force Base Sand, many investigators believe the killer left Japan shortly after the murders. If he fled to South Korea, North Korea, China, or any country with limited law enforcement cooperation with Japan, he'd be effectively untouchable even if his identity were discovered. If he was connected to US military and left on military transport, his departure might not even have been recorded in civilian databases. The killer could have been out of Japan before Haruko even discovered the bodies. Living in plain sight. The alternative is more unsettling. He's still in Japan, living a normal life, confident he'll never be caught. With no criminal record, no fingerprints in databases, and no DNA match to anyone in the system, he could be anyone. A salaryman riding the train to work, a shop owner selling groceries, a teacher, a father. The Setagaya killer could walk past the police information booth on December 30th, take a flyer about himself and walk away unrecognized. Part 10. Why hasn't he been caught? This is the question that haunts everyone familiar with this case. The killer left behind his DNA, blood, saliva, hair, feces, his fingerprints everywhere, his clothing, every single item, his footprints, evidence of his recent activities, food consumed, sand from specific locations, digital traces, computer logs, even his cologne scent. It's more evidence than most criminals leave in a lifetime of crime, and yet, 24 years later, he remains unidentified. Why? Reason 1. No match in databases. The most fundamental problem, his DNA and fingerprints aren't in any database. If you've never been arrested, never served in military, in a country that fingerprints, never applied for certain licenses or documents, you might not be in any database at all. The killer was young, 15, 25. It's entirely plausible he'd never been fingerprinted for any reason. And DNA databases in 2000 were primitive. Even now, not everyone's DNA is on file, especially in countries with strong privacy protections. Reason 2. He left Japan. If the killer fled to a country with poor information sharing with Japan, he'd be safe even if eventually identified. Japan's law enforcement cooperation varies by country. Strong cooperation, USA, UK, major Western nations, moderate, South Korea, China, but complicated by politics, weak, North Korea, many developing nations. If he's in North Korea, he's essentially unreachable. If he's in rural China, finding him would be nearly impossible. If he died in any country without reporting death to Japan, they'd never know. Reason 3. Technology limitations. In 2000, DNA analysis was much less sophisticated. The detailed ancestry information wasn't available until years later. Even now, genetic genealogy, the technique used to catch the Golden State Killer in 2018, relies on voluntary DNA database participation. If the killer's relatives haven't submitted DNA to genealogy sites, this technique won't work. Fingerprint matching requires manual comparison in many cases. With no starting point, no suspect to compare to, you can't just magically identify prints. Reason 4. The mixed ancestry puzzle. The killer's mixed European, Asian ancestry makes identification harder, not easier. In Japan, someone of obvious mixed ethnicity stands out, but the killer might not look obviously mixed. He could pass as Japanese or Korean or Chinese, depending on which features he inherited. The genetic markers tell us about his ancestry, but not necessarily about his appearance. Reason 5. He doesn't know he left evidence. This sounds strange, but consider, the killer might not realize how much evidence he left. In 2000, public knowledge of DNA forensics was less widespread. The killer might have thought, I wore gloves, he did, I'll be fine. He might not have understood that saliva on ice cream containers contains DNA, feces contains DNA, a single hair contains DNA, fingerprints on bottles are permanent. If he doesn't know he left evidence, he has no reason to hide or flee or worry. He might just continue living his life, confident he was careful enough. Reason 6. Misidentification of clues. What if police interpretation of some evidence is wrong? What if the Edwards AFB sand came from a bag or container that happened to have been at Edwards before, not from the killer personally visiting? What if the Korean shoes were a gift or were purchased online somehow, not indicating the killer had been to Korea? What if the European maternal DNA is much more distant than suspected, a great-great-grandmother rather than a mother? Misunderstanding even one major piece of evidence could send the investigation in entirely wrong directions. Reason 7. Police mistakes. This is uncomfortable to suggest, but it's worth considering. Did police make mistakes in the initial investigation that let the killer escape? Some criticisms that have been raised. The crime scene wasn't secured immediately. Haruko entered and contaminated it. Some evidence collection may have been imperfect. Initial theories, angry skateboarder, may have wasted crucial early days. Neighboring houses were already demolished, empty, reducing potential witness pool. But to be fair, the police worked this case exhaustively. More than 280,000 officers over 2 decades suggests serious commitment. Reason 8. He's dead. The simplest explanation for why he's never been caught. He died shortly after the murders. Car accident, illness, suicide, out of guilt, another crime where he was killed. If he died in 2001, that would explain everything. The DNA and fingerprints would be in no database because he was dead before they could be added. The lack of similar subsequent crimes would make sense. His absence from international travel records wouldn't be suspicious. He could be buried somewhere, his identity unknown even to himself. If death occurred before identification could happen, and the case would never be solved. Part 11. The evidence speaks. Let's return to the evidence and see what it really tells us, separate from speculation. Fact 1. The killer was young, male, physically fit. He climbed a tree, squeezed through a small window, fought a grown man, and remained active for 6+ hours after the murders. This requires youth and fitness. Fact 2. The killer had mixed European-Asian ancestry. This is scientifically verified from DNA. His mother or maternal line had European ancestry. His father or paternal line was East Asian. Fact 3. The killer had been to or had access to things from South Korea. The shoes were only sold in South Korea. This is not speculation, it's documented fact. Fact 4. The killer had been exposed to sand from Edwards Air Force Base and from a Japanese skate park. The sand analysis is specific. These locations are confirmed. Fact 5. The killer stayed in the house for many hours after the murders. Computer logs, digestive evidence, and logical timeline confirm he stayed minimum 1 to 6 hours, possibly until dawn. Fact 6. The killer ate simple, cheap food, before the murders. String beans and sesame seeds in his digestive system. Common, inexpensive. Fact 7. The killer was injured during the struggle with Mikio and required first aid. His blood at the scene confirms this. The amount of blood suggests significant injury. Fact 8. The killer wore relatively new clothing. The purple-white shirt had been released only 2 months earlier. The Uniqlo jacket, September 2000, 3 months earlier. He was wearing current season clothing. Fact 9. The killer wore Drakkar Noir cologne. Both handkerchiefs smelled of this specific fragrance, popular men's cologne. Fact 10. The killer took some money but left more behind. This wasn't primarily a robbery, or he would have taken everything of value. What this profile suggests: young, teens to mid to 20s, mixed ethnicity, connection to South Korea, possibly connected to US military or someone who'd been to Edwards AFB, had access to skate parks, wore popular cologne, bought current season clothing, ate cheap food, physically fit enough to climb, fight, and stay active for hours despite injury. This describes a young person of mixed heritage, possibly living in or frequently visiting South Korea, with some connection, however distant, to US military facilities, who skateboards or hangs out at skate parks, who tries to dress fashionably but doesn't have much money for food. That profile could fit thousands of people in East Asia in 2000. But only one of them murdered the Miyazawa family. Epilogue: The house that isn't there. 2025, 25 years later. The Miyazawa home is gone. The entire neighborhood has been transformed. Where houses once stood, there's now park space, green grass, walking paths, playground equipment. Children play where the Miyazawa children died. They laugh and run and climb, oblivious to the history beneath their feet. Soshigaya Park is peaceful. The skateboarding area is still there, though it's been renovated. Skateboarders practice tricks, the sound of wheels on concrete echoing through the space. On December 30th each year, police still set up their information booth near where the house once stood. They hand out flyers to park goers, hoping someone somewhere knows something. And every year, no one does. The killer's legacy, the Setagaya family murder, changed Japan in ways large and small. It led to legal reforms. The elimination of murder's statute of limitations means the killer can be prosecuted even now, decades later. It changed how Japanese police handle DNA evidence, how they cooperate internationally, how they approach cold cases. It became a cautionary tale about security, locks on windows, awareness of surroundings, the understanding that violence can strike anywhere, even in safe neighborhoods. But mostly, it left a wound, a question that can't be answered, a family that can't be brought back, a killer who walked away and disappeared into the night. What the Miyazawas lost. Let's not forget, amid all the forensic details and theories and speculation, what actually happened. Ray never grew up, never went to school beyond kindergarten, never had first love, never graduated, never became whatever he might have become. Nina never finished elementary school, never became a teenager, never had dreams realized or goals achieved. Yasuko never saw her children grow, never became a grandmother, never grew old with Mikio. Mikio never retired, never enjoyed the fruits of decades of work, never walked Nina down the aisle or taught Ray to drive. 4 lives ended. A grandmother who discovered their bodies and never recovered from the trauma. A sister who lost her entire family in one night. Extended family, friends, colleagues, all affected by ripples of grief that spread outward from one house on one night. The killer took all of that and walked away. The unanswered question. 25 years, more than 280,000 police officers, more than 12,545 pieces of evidence, and the question remains, who killed the Miyazawa family? We know what he looked like approximately. We know his ancestry. We know what he wore, what he ate, where he'd been. We know he stayed for hours after killing them, making himself at home in their house like Goldilocks in the Three Bears cottage. But we don't know his name, we don't know his face, we don't know why. And until someone somewhere recognizes the evidence and comes forward, until a relative submits DNA to a genealogy database, or someone remembers something suspicious from December 2000, or the killer himself confesses, the case will remain unsolved. The Miyazawa family deserves justice. Haruko died without seeing it. The surviving family members grow older each year, hope fading. But the evidence remains. DNA doesn't degrade completely, fingerprints don't disappear, and technology continues advancing. Someday, tomorrow, or 10 years from now, or 50 years from now, someone will run a test, or check a database, or make a connection. And the Setagaya killer's name will finally be known. Until then, we're left with the evidence, the theories, and the haunting image of a man eating ice cream in a house full of corpses, using a computer while 4 bodies cool around him, sleeping peacefully on a sofa before walking out into the dawn. The killer who stayed. The warning. There's something uniquely terrifying about this case that goes beyond the violence. It's the casualness, the comfort, the way the killer moved through that house after murdering a family as if he belonged there, as if killing was just a task to complete before relaxing. Most criminals flee. Guilt, fear, survival instinct, something drives them away from the scene, but this killer felt comfortable enough to stay for hours, to eat, to rest, to browse the internet. That level of disconnect from normal human emotion is perhaps more frightening than the violence itself, because it means the killer is out there somewhere, living among us, working, shopping, existing in society, looking normal, acting normal, but capable, we now know, of extraordinary violence followed by extraordinary calm. The Setagaya case reminds us that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like everyone else. Sometimes they wear popular cologne and current season clothing and size 11 shoes. Sometimes they're standing right next to you and you'd never know. On cold December nights in Tokyo, when families gather for New Year's preparations, some people think of the Miyazawas. They think about a family that was doing exactly what they're doing now, preparing for the holiday, spending time together, living ordinary lives. They think about how quickly everything can change, how a locked door doesn't always keep danger out, how the people you love can be here one moment and gone the next, stolen by senseless violence. And they wonder, as we all wonder, could it happen to us? Is the killer still out there? Will he ever be caught? The police say, we're still investigating. We'll never give up. The evidence says, I am here. I can tell you almost everything except his name. The killer says nothing. He's had 25 years to say something, to confess, to explain, and he's remained silent. Wherever he is, whatever he's doing, he knows what happened in that house on December 30th, 2000. He knows why he climbed through that window, why he killed a 6-year-old boy with his bare hands, why he stabbed a father, a mother, an 8-year-old girl, why he stayed to eat their food and use their things. He knows. And someday perhaps the rest of us will know too. Until then, the case remains open. The evidence waits. The family members sleep in graves in Tokyo, and somewhere in Japan, in Korea, in America, or anywhere in the world, a man wakes up each morning and goes about his day, carrying a secret that weighs 4 lives. The Setagaya family murder. The killer who stayed. The case that will not close until justice finally comes. Sleep well, if you can.